Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, this time joined by two special guests, Marc Centanni and Gary Wehrkamp of Harpazo. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Great to be here. Good to talk to you guys again.
Better than I deserve.
Chris, my friend, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I am so happy to have these fellas on with us. Before we even get started, I really feel like it needs to be said. Major thanks goes out to Gary. He was our first interview we've ever did on the podcast, and he reached out to us and offered his time, and that really put us on the map and gave us some credibility when others, when we would reach out to others and ask them if we were, if they would do an interview with us. So that really means the world to us. And so we will always remember Gary as the guy who kind of broke us in with interviews, because we got a lot of really cool interviews after that. And so I think at the time we had not really even considered going that route yet, but given the offer, it was just too I just couldn't say no. To talk to Gary about one of my all-time favorite bands, and I was hoping maybe we could get a half hour, 45 minutes, and we got the history of Shadow Gallery start to finish. It was I go back and listen to it sometimes, and I hate listening to myself, but that is just it was such a cool moment. So I just really want to make sure that I say that on the onset here. So thank you, Gary, for that.
Wow, I'm honored. I'm trying to remember. I do remember the interview pretty well. That it was just a good time talking to you guys. But I didn't. I had forgotten that I was the first person. So yeah, that's cool. Cool to hear.
You always remember your first, right? That's what they say. So that's. Obviously, a special thanks to you, Gary. But we were so happy to hear that this project, the Harpazo project, was a thing, right? It was this collaboration between really, I guess, master and pupil in many ways. Marc, tell us how this project kind of got off the ground, but not only so much with the project, but your relationship to Gary, and from what I understand, you were his guitar student, correct?
Yeah, I was. So back when there was MySpace, for all you kiddos out there, I was looking for a guitar teacher. I was actually obviously a Shadow Gallery fan beforehand. Fates Warning, Dream Theater, all my favorite bands, and I was like, yeah. By the way, doing guitar tabs in Shadow Gallery was impossible to find, and when I did find one, I'm like, I can't do this. How do you play this song? Oh my gosh, so hard back. But it was funny. I was looking for a guitar teacher, and Gary showed up in my MySpace. I befriended him on there, and then I found out he was only about an hour away. Again, it was all kind of like an accident. I wasn't looking for Gary, but I found him. And just like you weren't looking for Gary for your podcast, and he found you, kind of like that with me. So I'm like, he found me, and I found him, and so he was an hour away from me. I lived in New Jersey at the time, and he had a studio. I'm like, I'm looking for a guitar teacher. Who better to learn from, right? One of my heroes. So I used to drive over there about every Tuesday morning, and I would do guitar lessons with him. And we would do you would get me started on Malmsteen was one of the first things we would do, and we would do all kinds of really cool little projects. And he would always try to incorporate the things that I like to do, but while giving me guitar lessons. So it was always, sometimes there were life lessons too. I was a young kid at the time. I was 21, 22. So it was always a great time. And we really, over a period of time, we started to get our friendship started to grow. And I revealed to him finally that I had this idea for a project. And he goes, well, that's interesting. This could be fun. Let's do it. And from there, he was so willing to take it on and work with me, and that's how we got started.
And what was the genesis of the project? How did the idea for the story kind of come to you? And because it's an intricate story. It's not something that's like a fly by night type of thing. It's, it's up there with a lot of the concept albums that I'm sure you grew up listening to.
Oh yeah. Huge concept album listener. So many great bands. So there's a little bit of backstory. So basically, I grew up in a household. We weren't like very religious, but we talked about our faith, and my father would always talk a little bit about Revelation with my mother, and I was like always kind of interested in the story, and I used to just kind of like read it at night, and I was like would read the Bible on my own, and I was always kind of interested by the whole that part of the Bible, the New Testament, and it led to a love of the Bible in general. But that's kind of where it all started for me. And I would listen to Christian metal a lot growing up, like Blood Good and Sacred Warrior. So I had like a mixture of, I grew up with all this Christian rock that my dad listened to. And then I grew into progressive metal because of my love of Queensryche. It kind of moved to Dream Theater, Fates Warren, Shadow Gallery, and it started to metamorph outsize throughout time into being more specific in the genre. So anyway, so that was key things of me growing up. And I was a writer, and I was always coming up with stories. And one day a story hit me. I was looking at a painting of Gustave Doré, Paradise Lost, and I was listening to Seven Angels by Avantasia. And then I'm like, I have an idea, and let's do an album. It was news writer, and I was finding my faith. I kind of fell out of it, and I was just doing a lot of research, and so all of a sudden I'm like, this is cool, but it didn't start out like very story driven. It was more like, I'll just do the album of Revelation, and I'll just do all these songs, and it'll just be kind of very biblical, and it'll just be the verses of the Bible. And that's how originally it started. It wasn't like a really big like Operation Mindcrime kind of story. And so I first showed up to Gary with all these song titles. I think there was like 30 song titles or something crazy like that. And he was like, we got to get this down, man. Like, we're going to do like a 4 album, like this could be 4 albums or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, I got to get this down. And I had an idea of a song. It was actually Small Price to Pay. That was actually the first song we wrote, believe it or not. It's like track 9 or 10 on the album. And I had an idea for a song. And I still was, and I all of a sudden had a story like about, getting the mark of the beast. And I'm like, this is kind of interesting. I don't hear a lot of songs about this, and, rejecting it. I'm like, that's kind of cool, and very kind of Braveheart-esque, and rejecting it, and the guy dies or whatever. And I'm like, this could be an interesting story, but how do I build it? And it kind of started from there. And all of a sudden, I was talking to my brother one night, and I'm like, it'd be so cool if I did like this story. Maybe there's this character, does this, that, and the next thing I knew, within like 10 minutes, I had an outline of a story. But I didn't, that's when it really came together. And I started having more of a direction when I went in the studio to work with Gary versus just working on kind of these one-off songs that really weren't connected. So,
and Gary, when he comes to you with this, like, encyclopedic, set of ideas that just kind of, extended to, again, possibly 30 different song titles. What were your initial thoughts? Was it something like that you thought you'd have to polish up, or was it like right away you saw the inspiration, were able to kind of just run with it?
Well, first I was very, very happy Marc was taking this initiative to try to do something like this. And, I'm no stranger to concept albums and producing. And, there was some work to be done because Marc had a lot of ideas, and to be fair, this story is all his, all the way, but he developed it. And when we sat down initially, it was, all right, let's just make this more cohesive. And I always remembered like Bob Ezrin's role in Pink Floyd The Wall of trying to kind of keep it all together, because it's easy to have a million ideas. But Marc had a lot of great ideas, and I was happy to like start shaping them into individual chapters with him,
And Marc, had you written music before? Or obviously I know you were playing guitar for some time, but like, was this your first crack at actually like putting songs together, or was this like one of many projects along the way?
I had a guitar teacher when I was a little bit younger for a short period of time, and we did write some songs that really weren't much to write home about. I was pretty young.
Sure.
I wasn't really much of I was writing lyrics. And by the way, when I said I brought the encyclopedia of stuff, I brought lyrics too. So it wasn't just song titles. It was lyrics and music ideas and who are the guest artists going to be. So I thought a lot through what I wanted before I kind of came out with all of it. But yeah, this was really my first crack at definitely a professional release. And it only took a little while to come out, but it was definitely the first attempt to do a real professional release. And that's where Gary came in handy with the music part. He could really help shape everything together and make the music and melodies fit the ideas.
And as you mentioned the guest vocalists and all the people that helped put all this together. What was that process like, getting in touch with, the DC Coopers of the world to get them on board with working on this project? Because I'm sure that that had to be really interesting, and almost kind of like, I would imagine you were a bit starstruck. I mean, I know I would be, like, getting to work with somebody like DC or Marc Zonder. Like, these are guys that are names that have been in the genre, big heavy hitters in the genre for years. So what was that like?
Well, thankfully I met Gary first. So I kind of helped, like, okay, these are normal people, because when I was 21, they were not normal people. And I have an embarrassing John Petrucci story where I met him at a rest stop after a Dream Theater concert, like glowing, it's like, being Gary kind of helped ease that a little bit.
Sure.
But all these guys are fantastic. And for Gary, at least with Marc Zonder, DC Cooper, and a couple other ones, I'll let him speak to that, because that, those are obviously people I loved, but he's the one who knew them. He's the one who brought them in. So
I'm going to ask a selfish question. I was a big Narnia fan growing up. So going back to like the late 90s, when I saw that you had kind of linked up with Christian from Narnia. How did that come about? Because it was, some of the choices were, well, obviously, artists that have been inspired by, the Christian metal genre and that sort of a thing, but some of them are a little more obscure, and that one comes to mind. Great vocalist, but just not at the forefront of everybody's mind when they're putting a project like this together.
It's funny. We had with Christian, I got into Narnia a little bit later in life, and I was listening to one of the songs, and I'm like, he's a really good singer. I'm really digging. I was listening to Golden Resurrection, actually, before even Narnia. And I just really dug his attitude and how, like, he was, not afraid to speak his mind and about his feelings, about his faith. And I'm like, he might dig something like this. So I showed Gary one of his songs. I'm like, what do you think? And he was like, yeah, you can probably sing. Now, here's the thing. Every time Gary read a song, we would always go really, really high up in the vocal range. So we had to get people who could hit that range. So I had to bring proof. Like, here's Christian from Narnia. Do you think he can sing this song, Gary? And Gary would be like, I think he can. Or he would say, no, he'd say no. So I presented this singer to him, and he gave me the seal of approval. And then I just reached out to him. And Christian's such a nice guy. I mean, he was so excited. I didn't even have to ask twice. He was all in on the project.
And Gary, as you're kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together, did you have artists in mind to kind of help with the songs, or was everything written and then it was finding the right guest to put on their finishing touches to this stuff?
Well, I mean, in writing these parts and these pieces, I mean, we're always working towards a possibility of singers, and we knew in this kind of metal genre, we're probably not going to be. We're going to be looking more for a David Coverdale than we are, a Pearl Jam kind of Eddie Vedder voice. So, it helps to when constructing these songs, think and sing high melodies and make up things that are, kind of in my range is general what this industry's range is. So. It wasn't that challenging to kind of figure all that out, but we were always working towards a mean to an end to the different characters and giving everybody a voice.
I think you were fortunate enough to put this together in a time where we can interact with people across the world and send files back and forth, because this was not the kind of thing, I have to assume, where people were getting flown into a studio and recording, because budgets being what they are. But how was that process like as you were kind of interacting with folks from all over the world who were lending their talents to the Harpazo project?
I mean, geographically, if they were close, they were coming here. I'd prefer to have everybody here if we could, because as a producer, there's a lot that goes on, and it's not just turn the mic on and record. It's a lengthy process, and one I love doing, but I'm no stranger to the hard work for that, so I want to be involved in that. So when we had to produce by proxy, so to speak, it's a matter of just communication, a lot of notes, and then just having a fully produced demo. I mean, our demos, are not that crazily different than the final product, really.
Yeah.
But having that where it's worked out, it's not like a sketch. It's a very detailed, this is how I want the vocals to go. And by constructing it to Marc's great words, but I know how I want it to be sung, what's the best way to explain that is to actually sing it and say, this is kind of what we're looking for. Be your own thing. Go do your own thing here and here, but not here. And, just get into some of those details. But I think all the artists, as professional as they are, they realized it was not just some rough draft. It was a very, very detailed demo that was, very specific in what its requirements were.
Yeah, I mean, basically all the experienced guys all the proxy people are usually the most experienced ones that have done so many albums already. So they all really, but DC Cooper came into the studio and he actually sang all the parts with Gary.
Yeah.
So that would be, to have him, he sings so much of the album. Same thing with Lee Lemperly. They sing, so the people who do most of the vocals, and Gary as well, they all did it in the studio. The guest parts aren't super long, which it works out because you don't have to worry about them singing 7 songs by proxy. It was only a song, maybe quarter of the song in there, but a lot of them were actually able to come in, other than like Christian, obviously you named, and Les Carlson and Ray and Michael Drive. They all had to record on their own, but they all have studios and they got someone to help them and they do it all the time. So it made it pretty easy.
And they're all big players on this. I'm sorry. But Lee Lemperly is a huge part. The character Relina is not a couple lines, so that's a lot to go over with her. And she was new to the studio. On the other hand, you have DC Cooper, who's no stranger to the studio or live, but just the same, it's a big part. He's one of the main characters. So, and he and I work so well together. Really well together. But definitely I can bring the best out of him. He knows how I work, and I definitely wanted to have him here. If somebody's doing a few lines or a smaller part, well, we'll make that work. But there's no reason to have him fly out here.
Chris, I'm going to actually throw a question at you, even though you're not in the hot seat. When we first heard this album, one of the albums that kind of came to mind was that Misa Mercuria album that came out now. I guess it's been over 20 years ago. Not only because DC sang on that album, but just in terms of the way it was produced and the concept and everything else. There was a reminder of that album, which is a real deep cut for many. But when you were, like Chris and I were such big Royal Hunt fans that it was, if DC was on it, we had to hear it. When you went back to Harpazo and have listened to it, now numerous times, did you have that same feeling or did you kind of move away from that?
I don't know that I would necessarily say that musically it's similar, but I think, DC being a big part of it and having a female vocalist play a role in the story, it just kind of reminded me of how I felt like the first time I had heard that, because that was literally, I was at Prague Power 3 in 2001 or 2002, whatever year it was, and DC was there performing with Silent Force, and I just remember walking up to one of the vendor tables, and I think the sticker on the album literally said like featuring DC Cooper and then like a bunch of other names, and I just bought it blindly and took it home and listened to it and thought, oh, this is really cool. And just the idea, like it's a concept album, like, and it has DC Cooper on it. I mean, it's proggy, so it kind of, that might be where the comparisons end for me. But I mean, it did remind me of that feeling that I had the first time I heard that album. It's just I'm always excited anytime I hear DC's voice. He's one of my all time favorite vocalists, so like that was an easy sell for me. But you know what? I'll take your question and I'll kind of twist that into a question for our guests. There's definitely some Shadow Gallery influence, especially in I Am God. I hear a lot of Shadow Gallery. Is that Marc's love of Shadow Gallery shining through in his songwriting, or is that Gary's like polish with like Marc's initial songwriting? Because especially like those the layered vocals and everything like really gave me Shadow Gallery vibes. I don't want to say that the whole album feels like a Shadow Gallery album, because I don't think that it does, but I think there are certain parts that almost feel like that vintage Shadow Gallery sound, which I feel like would probably be impossible to get away from with somebody like Gary being a part of it.
Well, if I got the guitar in my hand, I'm writing the riffs to his words. It's going to be hard not to sound like me. Although I really was trying not to make it sad. But you got to remember, a lot of this was coming in a period of activity where I was very busy with Shadow Gallery, preparing for tours, doing extra new versions of the songs for the tours. We just finished Digital Ghost. I mean, I was just putting Digital Ghost out when the riff for I Am God was there. And ironically, I say that I don't ever try to steal from myself, but that the chorus for that was something I wrote with Mike Baker for the Carved in Stone album. So I didn't realize that for about 10, 15 years. It sounds like a long time. About 10 years. But then eventually we were getting close to mixing it. I'm going, where have I heard this before? I'm going, 1994 up in New York. We were at a writing session. And so I've always been trying to fit that chord progression because I love that chord progression. So I guess, guilty as charged to a degree. But, I don't think it's a Shadow Gallery.
It makes complete sense.
Yeah. And plus, I'm a fan of that. So when we're working on the music, and I'm like, that's how I want it to sound. The only thing that we got, it wasn't like a big debate or anything, but we were trying to decide whether we do drop tuning or standard tuning. And that's where we kind of went back and forth on, where I was kind of coming in with, I was listening to a lot of Camelot at the time, and a lot of the albums were, you put on music now, everyone does drop tuning, right? And that's exactly what Gary said to me. Everyone does drop tuning. Let's just do standard tuning. And that was like a big...
I was pretty adamant about it. Like, there was no reason to. I mean, if we need to get the evil out in a riff or something, we'll find better notes, but we don't need to go and do what everybody else is doing. I'm not a fan of that.
That makes sense.
I never had to tune my guitar down. I could keep it standard tuning the whole time. I was very surprised by that. I was like, oh, all right, you sure? But I don't regret it at all. It
sounds refreshing in a way because everybody else is doing the opposite now. So it actually, in many ways, breathes new life into some of this stuff. But having talked about that was one of the two singles that you selected, I think, for the album before its release. What was the rationale behind that? I mean, obviously, they're two of the more infectious choruses on the album, and the album has a lot of infectious choruses. But what was the impetus behind choosing the two singles?
All right. So if it was up to me, okay, Gary would probably agree, we would love to drop a long song first because some of our favorite songs are the long ones, right? So, but we know in this day and age, we got to give someone a tight package, and I Am God was that. And when we were writing songs, we definitely planned, we didn't, it's funny, a lot of them ended up being pretty long. But it wasn't always planned that way. Sometimes the songs were planned to be long. Sometimes they planned to be multiple songs that we ended up merging into one. But for I Am God, we knew that was when we first wrote it. That was one we did Small Price to Pay, and that was a short one too. That was actually even shorter than that one until we did someone with the outro later on. But we knew we wanted to pick a short one, and we knew that one kind of encompassed everything about Harpazo and everything. The feeling, the lyric writing, the music. It just had the whole feeling in there, and how could you not choose it? It was a good choice, and it still is probably the most popular song still, even though the whole album's been out for a month. So,
well, on that note, why don't we give it a listen, and then we'll come back with more with the guys from Harpazo.
Healing the blind, polluting the cover of time.
That was I Am God, the first single from the Harpazo album. And again, thank you guys for joining us. I think that in many ways, and I'm saying this from the fan perspective, not from the musician perspective, because I can't really comment on that, but just from the fan perspective, I think that when you listen to an album, you can kind of tell which song should be, and I put that in quotes, the single. And in many ways, I think that this was the track that will speak to the largest swath of people. And I'll say this, I think that everyone can have their favorite track. My favorite track from the album was actually Change of Heart Part 1, but we wouldn't make a great single. It's my favorite track, but it's not the song I would select for a single, whereas I Am God will speak to the largest swath of people and kind of hook them as to why they should keep listening.
Good choice. Yeah. I like that. Me and Gary always say that's like our secret favorite one that we come back to every once in a while. Is Change Your Heart. Probably forget about that song all the time.
And again, I mean, to be fair, I could listen to the album and have a new favorite each time, but the last 2 or 3 times I listened to it, that was the one that kind of just rose to the top. As you were kind of, putting everything together, was song order difficult, or did the lyrics kind of speak for themselves because the story obviously progresses through the album?
I would say it definitely, once I figured out the ending of the story and then I figured out the beginning of the story, it was easy to progress. But I had all the songs already pre-written, whether or not, again, they're not the final versions. But when I came to him with, all right, this is the next song, it was easy to kind of just go into the next one. We knew what was going to happen next. So, it wasn't too bad at all. Ultimatum was one of the ones where we wrote that one. We knew that was going to be before Change Your Heart Part 1. And so again, once we got the first 2 were Small Price to Pay and Change Your Heart Part 2. Those were actually the first 2 songs we wrote. And then we went from the beginning of the album and we came back to Book of Life towards the end. So,
we didn't write in order. It wasn't written in order in any way. I don't think. I mean, it was a matter of, first of all, trying to create songs out of words. We got words, we have ideas, and we have to have songs. We need choruses, and whatever chorus was the hot thing that we could develop at that time. Let's make this more concise. Let's not just have 100 words, but let's pick 3. Let's do whatever and make a chorus out of it. And then we knew that's a song. This is generally where it is in the timeline, and so we knew Mark knew Doomed. A small Book of Life, as we call it now. Sorry, was good at. We have all these different demo titles back in the day, but we knew it was going to end there. We knew it was going to start with this certain song, and but it wasn't like a strict.
Sometimes it was
a lot of ideas that had to be fitted.
Let's work on the smaller ones first. But I think we did it pretty relatively in order. Once we got done with those 2, it wasn't too out of order. I think for the most part, a lot of the songs were written in order. Once we got past those couple, and then we kind of bounced around a little bit, but for the most part, And we wrote these songs every Tuesday for an hour or 2 hours at a time for several years. It took the whole process was slow, it was methodical. We had words, we knew where the setting was, we knew we wanted the music to sound like, and we were just a matter of putting music to words and getting that feeling across. So
and I think that the thought and the effort that went into it resonates with each listen, at least for me. And I'll say this because when I first heard the entire album, I liked it right away, but I don't think I was ready for what it was. So I had to keep going back to it time and time again because there was just a lot to absorb. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I think that some of the better albums are the ones that maybe don't hit you right away, and it takes a little time, almost work, to kind of get through it. I mean, again, in the best way possible. This was one of those albums. Every time I listened to it, I found myself enjoying it more and more. And for that reason, I never got tired of it. I'm still not tired of it. It'll still stay in rotation for me because there's always so much that you could sink your teeth into. And to that end, Gary, I'm going to ask you, was it difficult putting all these different pieces together? Not just because you worked on it for so long, but when you're dealing with so many different artists and obviously a lot of different ideas over the course of time, was that more difficult than kind of an album that got thrown together a little bit quicker?
I wouldn't say it was difficult. I mean, the other artists really kind of came after the fact. It was words, idea, then it was handed to me to kind of write music to it and take whatever ideas Mark had, whether just descriptions of this might be good if we did something heavier here, or we did this year. But working with the other people, it was really just two drummers early on. It was, I did think I did the demo for all the drums, but it was getting Marc Zonder, who I was working with at the time quite a bit, talking to every day, and Nicholas Kahn out in Germany, who I was working with to a degree. But once we had their drum parts to go with mine, the ones I kept, it was just chipping away at the details. And a lot of the songs actually I thought came together quickly, in a sense of Marc had the words, and here's a couple chords, and we only have an hour, so let's need a chorus and an outro. And then it was a lot of work, late at night by myself on stuff. But it was a fun process because I always like to, and Marc does too, put the details and everything. And for me to have the time on and off to go back and just add more and more detail, and more backup vocals. It's just fun. Like the song's done, but let's sing another 50 parts. So let's add something else in there and keep it low in the mix. That comes back to what you started saying, is that it's not going to be something that's easily digestible as a product right away. But that's kind of what we wanted. We wanted this to be an album that would grow on you, and I hope to God everybody can get to 25 listens. I know many people won't, but those are the ones who are going to reap the rewards of all the extra time that we put into this record. So
I could not agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You mentioned Nicholas Kahn. How did you get involved with him over in Germany? What were you doing with him at the time? And I say this because Lord of the Lost, his new band, new in quotes, has really gotten very popular. In this circle over the last bunch of years. They did a bunch of shows. They were in New York, I think last year, about a year ago at this point. What was the connection there, and what kind of work were you doing with him on drums?
There wasn't really a big direct connection with him. It was more the band Flaming Row and Martin Schnell.
Okay.
And, I know Martin very well. I actually never met Nick face-to-face. Martin came out as a planned guest at a Shadow Gallery show in Germany and sang New World Order and 2 Minutes to Midnight with us on stage over there. So, I just came off this relationship of getting to know Martin, doing a Flaming Row project, and then having him join us. So we were talking about songs for the next Flaming Row, which Martin writes. I'm just a guest singer on. And we talked about Nick, and I remember Nick's great drumming, and I said, man, he's a great drummer. And I thought it would just be nice to branch out, I don't know if Marc Centanni and I needed other drummers, but I thought this could be cool to give him a hand, because my forte is not double bass drumming. I'm kind of falling out of practice with I Am God. I could have done it, but I'd have to spend 4 or 5 hours just getting my feet to get back in shape. So I was like, well, this guy can knock it out quick. I know that. So we gave him a couple songs, and Martin Schnella doesn't get enough credit, but he recorded all that out there in Germany for us and sent me the tracks, and they were very well together, very organized. They sounded great. And Nick's drumming was totally solid. I didn't edit anything. That's exactly what he played.
Were there any artists, Marc, that you had in mind that, and I'm not looking for names, I'm not looking to out anybody, but were there any artists that in your heart you had in mind and for whatever reason you were unable to get? And again, I'm not looking for names, but did you have those one or two where you'd I'd love to work with somebody, and for whatever reason it just didn't materialize?
Absolutely.
Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney. That's what Marc said to me all the time. I want Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney. And
Michael Jackson would be difficult, but at least you had a shot at Sir Paul.
Gary's this is so funny because me and him always go back. He always I'm sure he says that, but he knows that we get the most amount of people to listen to it. So that's where his brain goes. My brain goes, I'm a fan and I want to get this band because I love this band. And that's how my brain he's definitely right. Those would be obviously you get James LaBrie or whoever, right? Those are the top ones. But yeah, absolutely. There was definitely a couple singers that just couldn't do it, didn't have the time, wanted to do it, but it's funny. We were actually doing all the guest recording for vocals. A lot of them, at least, during COVID. So it was right before that I reached out to everybody, and everyone's I can't do it. Or there's a couple people here and there, but I can't do it. But I bet you they would have changed their tune if I would have asked during COVID. But by then I already had all the guests picked out. I was if I was just off by 2 or 3 months, I was thinking about the other day, I probably could have had these other guys because they're probably just sitting around doing nothing anyway. So, but
when all the
we
tours
talk-
got canceled.
Yeah, we talk about all the time, like, we say, like, boy, we sure got a lot more interviews done during the pandemic because everybody just had a lot more free time. I mean, it's just, that was just the way it was.
I asked everybody right before COVID, and that's when like, no, I don't have time, or I actually had one that said yes, and then they just disappeared on me. And then during COVID, and then they emailed me back like 5 months later, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, we moved on. So I would love to name me next time. Thank you so much. So really, listen, I had a list of at least 2 or 3 people per role. I knew I wasn't. Gary warned me from the beginning. He was like, listen, you're going to want, I see your list now. Some of these people are going to be hard to get. Like, I'll say this one because there's no way he would have done it, but like George Lynch was like my favorite guitar player from Dokken, right? And like Gary's like, you need to bring your expectations down there, son. Like George Lynch is solo on your album, like.
Well, no, you know what? Hang on, no. I've done records with George on Magna Carta, not where we were in the same room, but I've had connections. I could have asked him maybe, but because I've worked with Jeff Pilson, but it was a matter of like, what's your budget for this? You're a kid from New Jersey.
Yeah,
I have a few dollars.
Budget, yeah. So George would probably be like, that would have been a lot. So I was like,
that's why I'm joking about. That's why I'm joking about Michael Jackson, because like I remember your first list. Like, it'd be great to have all these people. I'm like, well, you don't have a record label. How are you going to pay for this? Like, these people don't do stuff for free. but who sounds just like that person? Who we can get is this person. So we had Mark's initial list, my secondary list, Mark's third list, and then some sort of combination in between of I know these people.
And he wants the same music. So if you think about it, for us, it's like DC Cooper. Come on, like of course I love DC Cooper. He's a great singer, and Gary was like, I could probably ask him. And I'm like, okay, and so we did. And when our first choice for another song came up, I was like, I didn't get the singer I wanted. He had another idea. So again, it was always kind of cool that even though, and it worked out, you know what I mean? Like, just because somebody wasn't the first choice doesn't mean the second choice, third choice wasn't a great choice as well. It's hard to tell. Like when you listen to music and you try to imagine, like when I was listening to Small Price to Pay, I would like sit here and like try to imagine what Christian would sound like on it. Right. And then when I got it back, I'm like, wow, it sounded even better than I thought it was going to be. Like, that's even cooler. Like, and you would just try to, like, it was hard sometimes. And you think about, like, Arion, right, when he has, like, all those guests. I don't know how he does it. But he has them sing, like, every other line. Like, we didn't do that. We have songs that are kind of like that, but not – that would have been a lot harder to do. And that's why he always brings them into the studio, and they have a label that does all that. And it definitely works out. It's definitely a better system for that. But we – it was just we had to really be – calculated with our choices. And again, I never made a choice of somebody I didn't like. So I didn't pick anybody who was like, we should get them on the album because they're famous. Like, that never came to mind. It was always people I loved. And that's why you see like obscure reference, like Narnia, like, I guess you could call them obscure. I don't think they're that obscure, but like, you could say they're a little bit more obscure, from Sweden there. But yeah, again, that was just kind of like where my thought process was, just getting the right people, what sound and, and getting really the right people in general, because you really want to make sure the people who are going to do it are going to put the time and effort in it and they believe in it.
That's right.
You don't want to just like pay somebody, here's some money, sing this part, and they just put half-assed effort into it and it sounds like garbage. Even though they're a great singer or whatever, they don't really, they're not into it. And I think that some of the musicians were like, I'm not into the music. And I thought that was cool when I did ask a musician if they didn't like the music, they would just say that. And I think that was fair. Like, if you didn't like the music, definitely don't want you to sing to it. Don't do it for just a paycheck. And I think all the singers, none of them were doing it really for money. They were all because they liked the music, they dug the concept, and I always sent them a book of information anyways. So they got it all and their heart was in it. And I think that was important.
That's the key. And it's funny. We had Arjun on our podcast probably about 6 months ago now, and we were talking about Arion, and we were kind of asking like, how does it come together, right? Because again, he's got a laundry list of the who's who of vocalists, and he's been doing it for 25 plus years. And he basically said, it's not that I write songs for certain voices. It's just that I write songs and I have an eye for talent as to who can sing it. And he's got a list, an A, a B, and a C. And then ultimately, until he hears it, and eventually that's when it all comes together. And in many ways, I think that this project had the same type of feel where, it just sounded like this was the guy or the woman that was supposed to be the singer for the song. Like, no matter what you can kind of conceptualize, when you got the finished product, you got a complete package. And I think that's just a testament not only to the songwriting, but to the selection process as well.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, by all means. And Gary, I'm going to ask you the obligatory question before I go to Mark with the same thing. What are your favorite tracks from the album? Because I'd love to play one more, before we let you guys go.
Oh God, I can't even begin to tell you how immersed we are into this record, and I hope it doesn't sound bad to say this, that I love something I co-created, but I do. So all of them, but I probably more so the Crucible and Golden Crown, and they're probably some of the ones that are maybe a little bit less accessible, but I think in time that, there's a lot of stuff there. And just a side note on it, Golden Crown was that was the one song that was so hard to finish and make work because of different fragmented musical ideas. And he was still developing this whole I-core thing. And we knew we wanted to have these different ideas, but that song was a mess. There was no way it was a long time. I was thinking this song's never going to make the record because can't connect part A to B because of the tempos and the key change, all the technical stuff. And, so in the end, that was the one that I think I personally worked the hardest on. And, there's a lot to that song, Golden Crown, especially.
And I think it's for that reason we should give it a listen now, just because it is so complex. Unfortunately, I don't know that a minute will do justice, but I would encourage everyone to go check out the album so they can hear the full, finished thing in its 8 minutes plus of glory. But here's Golden Crown. Mark, I'm gonna toss it over to you now that we've had a chance to listen to Golden Crown. What is your favorite track from the Crucible, and is there a particular reason why it's your favorite?
I'm gonna have to go Ultimatum, and here's why. That one was probably the quickest ones to write. I wrote all the lyrics, and they all just worked in the studio. It was like magic. That song, the chorus, everything just came together so perfectly. And I think for me, it encapsulated. It also, same thing with I Am God. This is a great turning point in the character Michael going against Jude Solomon, and that album cover is based off of that song. And I just love him pointing the gun at Jude, and them having this conversation, the classic good versus evil, and some of those words, man, were just. I can't even believe I wrote them sometimes. I'm like, man, I'm really, I'm saying that it doesn't come from me. It comes from the guy up there. But I listened to it. I'm like, wow, that's, I don't know if I could do that again, like write it like that again. Like that really captures exactly what I was trying to go for. And so I just love that song. It just means a lot to me. And it's one I can always put on. And I think it's very accessible too, on top of which. So, that's it.
It's funny because I read a review where basically where somebody compared this to Christian metal's Les Mis, and that just blew me away because I took my kids to their first Broadway show over the weekend, and I was thinking about the album and, and just the interview that we were going to do this week. And I said to myself, this really does in many ways lend itself to the big stage. Is that something that you ever considered or would ever consider doing in the future? I know that there's obviously financial constraints and budgetary issues with that, but that's kind of the setting that I think that this concept belongs in, just because it is a little bit deeper than a concert. It's really more of a Broadway production. You
got that right, for sure. Absolutely. It's a dream of mine for that to come true. It's funny. I was talking to the creator of The Thorn. He does, they do basically the story of Jesus. They do a whole presentation and they just start touring the entire US. Very popular, getting very popular. And I reached out to him. I'm like, how did you do that? Like, how did you take this thing that you just did in your church and now you're touring the US? And so he gave me a lot of great insight and some things to think about. And I'm like, well, maybe. And it's all about who you know, connecting, talking to people, taking a chance. And, he gave me a lot of, so who knows? We talk about it, all the guys, you ask DC Cooper, you ask Ray Parr, you ask Les Carlson, these guys love the music. They love it. And, it's funny because I didn't even know how much they did until we did a podcast with like DC and Ray, and I didn't know how much they enjoyed the album. And, so yeah, that would be definitely a dream, a whole production, maybe even expand upon it. Maybe Gary's not done working on Harpazo. Maybe we could turn it into a 2-hour show. Who knows? Like, this is not an hour long. So it's always, there's always something you could do with it. And I think even with the story I told, there is room to develop even more if I wanted to and go a little bit deeper into some of the topics that I had to kind of shorten up a little bit, and so anything is possible. But
I'm kind of glad that you mentioned that, because my next question was going to be, do you have another story you want to tell that's in your back pocket? And if so, do you want it to be based around the Bible and Christianity, or are there other themes that you kind of want to explore just out of curiosity? Like, I mean, the Bible has no shortage of stories.
No,
to be
definitely
told.
does not.
Trust me, 4 years of Catholic high school right here. But just curious if you've started to think about what's next for you and Harpazo or something else, if at all possible.
Yeah, and I have to just give props to Neil Morris. I mean, he just came out with Joseph. He did obviously the whole The Exorcist, Jesus Christ the Exorcist. So he's kind of like, I mean, I'd have to do a lot. This took us 10 years to do whatever. He's
writing albums every 6 months, it seems.
By the time we get to our story, he might have already done it already. So I might have to do something he's not going to think of. And I have to do in our future story if I'm going to do in our Bible story. One thing that's always interesting to me that we don't really know much about is like the millennial reign. So there could be something in there like the hierarchy of angels, something really fantastical, or it could be a completely different story. I'm not married to having to just do another, like a Christian rock album if we were to do another one. But this was a story that I needed to tell. And this one, God was pointing me, and it's been a tribulation to put it out. Like, it's been a crucible. So this was it, man. And in my brain, I think every once in a while, like, I could expand upon this story. I just saw Dream Theater came up with scenes from a memory book, and I'm like, oh, there's an idea, maybe TV. There's a lot of things that I could do with just this story alone beyond the 70 minutes that it is. And again, it is a longer album. So I guess focusing is key. Gary would say focus on one thing and then develop it from there. Right now, Harpazo is my focus. The Crucible is my focus. I'm going to knock every door down that I can to see how far I can take it before I start worrying about another story, if I even do another one. So,
how have you felt about the response that you've gotten so far from critics and fans? Like, have you been overwhelmed with the just how positive people feel about it? Like, I mean,
it's funny. Gary gets two different sides. Like, Gary gets people in the studio, so I always kind of like, what are the people saying? Because I'm here in my little office working remotely, all I see is what people post on Facebook. So like a lot of the reviews have been really great, just focusing on the good ones. I mean, there's been a lot of great ones. And that's why every time I have a good one, I take that quote and I put it on the website or something. And like, because a lot of people, even people who are not believers, and I always say this, like, albums, you don't have to be a believer to be interested in this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, I watch people watch things about aliens and all kinds of stuff on TV, and I'm just a big learner. I love learning about all religions and everything like that. So it's great to see that some people who don't have any belief at all in Christianity are enjoying the album too. And that's when I know it's successful. When I have somebody who's listening to it and they're like, I'm not even a believer and I like this. And that's really hard to do because people hear the word Jesus and they're like, you're preaching at me. I don't want to listen to it. Anytime you do politics or religion, it's dicey, but if it wasn't for the religion, the album wouldn't exist. So it's kind of like, what do you want me to do? Like this was my dream. I mean, I'm not going to be swayed by people telling me what not to write, So, the responses have been nice. And, Gary, in the studio, like, what do people say to you when they come in and your friends? Because sometimes I always enjoy hearing this.
I mean, I had a one or two listening parties, and to me, I know progressive rock as everybody in this forum right now does. But I brought my doctor over. He's a good close friend, but and he has a good taste in music, but he doesn't listen to 10-minute songs, nor does his wife. So I knew the expectations. I was going to take a lot of their time, but they gave me every second of 71 minutes and stood up and applauded after songs, and they all had the copies of the lyrics and the credits, and so I've gotten great responses. But you never know what people are going to think, but at the same time, I remember being on the phone with Mark going, "Trust me, people are going to love this. We're not putting it out till it's amazing," and that's just where we were coming from, and it's going to get some good attention. Well deserved.
Yeah, and well deserved at that. So I'm really truly happy for you guys, and I wish you nothing but the best of success. With the album and everything that's going to follow from it. I guess I will just give you guys the floor for a little bit. Gary, Mark, where can everybody find you, find your work, and like I said, anything else that you want to plug, now would be a great time because people need to hear this stuff, and we'll do everything we can, certainly. But the more that hear it, I think the more happier fans will be.
Sure. So I would definitely love it if you could first come subscribe on Facebook to Harpazo Music. Come check out our band, follow the Facebook page for all the latest updates, and just anytime we have something to post or feature or podcast reviews, you're going to get all the latest information from the Facebook group. In terms of buying the album, it is everywhere. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on harpazo.bandcamp.com. You can find it links to, obviously, our record label, Rock Shots record label. They have copies, and they're from Italy, but they are the main source of the albums. And also harpazomusic.com, our website. You'll go there. You can read a lot more about the biography behind everybody who's involved, see the music videos in one place. It kind of is the home of everything outside of just the Facebook, which it kind of is a little more scattered. And then I also recommend you check out, if you haven't, is go watch the full album visualizer, the whole album, all the lyrics. We did a whole presentation for the listening party, and I really am proud of that one. And I think that's like the coolest way to listen to music ever, to put it on and have like a visual the whole time with little snapshots of the story. I think every band should do that because it's not fair that no other band does it. And I'm like, I want to see the Tyranny one. I want to see the Dream Theater one. They put little factoids in there, and like, it's so cool to have it all in front of you like that and changing. So check out that visualizer, and that's on our YouTube page.
Yeah, I think, Mark, you covered all the avenues, so thanks. I mean, right now I'm just I'm promoting this. The other things I'm doing it's too soon to talk about, but I'm happy to be in this moment of time and partner with Mark and make this record that is, along with every record I make, it's a record of a lifetime for me that I put everything into and stand by it, and like it or not, this is us.
I love it. I think that's the perfect. Go ahead.
Before we sign off, I just would be remiss if I didn't ask Gary this question. I know it's on everybody's mind, and people want to know, what is the future of Amaran's Plight?
Best question ever. Best question ever. Thanks for switching it up on me, boy. Yeah. Amaran's Point. Record. I'm really proud of that record. I love that record.
That's a great album.
John Crawford is great on that. His role, which is kind of similar to what I'm doing with what we did with Marc here. It's very similar scenario. Somebody has an idea for a story, and let's make some songs out of it and make it the best thing we can. So I know you're not really serious, so I won't answer that any further. But
well, I really like the album, so I figured I'd ask. Might be a nice change than the usual question.
God,
I haven't heard anybody mention that record in a while.
When I was mowing the lawn today, actually, I put on what was it? Coming of Age. I put that one on. I like that song. That's a fun one for sure. The whole album was good. I actually remember buying that. I went to the studio. I'm like, "What's this?" And he had like the CDs stacked in his recording studio. I'm like, "Can I have one?" Like, this looks pretty cool. DC Cooper's on this, that's a great album. Hard to find. But if you do message, John Crawford told me recently that he still has copies left. You have to go find them, track them down on Facebook to get it. So,
Nice. I do have my copy. I have to admit, it's been a couple of years, I think, at least since I've listened to it. But that was really funny and made me laugh. But on that note, I thank you guys so much for joining us. I wish you nothing but the best of success, and I look forward to more things in the Harpazo world in 2024 and beyond. So thank you guys very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chase.
Thank you guys. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, guys.